Welcome once again to another episode of Luke Reacts. Today, I am going to go off on this whole story of baby Jesus wrapped in keffiyehs, baby Jesus in the rubble, all that kind of goodness that's out there. The politicization of the Nativity story, the virgin birth story, the Holy Family move going from Nazareth to Bethlehem to participate in the census that the Gospel of Luke describes as the motivation to go to Bethlehem. Before I get to all that, I need you all to please like and subscribe to our programs here. And also, if you are feeling very generous at this time of year, how about making a donation to the Philos Project? We are supported by people like you. So the donation button will be also in the comments section of this episode. All right. So with that, there has been several articles, several stories out there of baby Jesus wrapped in keffiyehs. And for those who don't know what a keffiyeh is, it's the traditional head covering of the Palestinian Arabs. It is, this checkered pattern, often black and white is the colors. Sometimes there are other colors, but black and white is predominant. And a lot of it started last December, by this guy named Munther Isaac. And if some of you remember, my first Luke Reacts show this year was when I kind of broke down what Tucker Carlson was interviewing Munther Isaac about the plight of Christians in Israel. And I said then, well, Munther Isaac doesn't have a clue what's going on with Christians in Israel. He is living in Bethlehem. He is the pastor of Christmas Church it's a Lutheran church in Bethlehem. And he became famous for his baby Jesus in the rubble. And there's a picture here that I can show you with his he tweeted this out once again this year. And so it's the second time he's done this. And let me just read to you his post, and because I'd like to kind of unpack this a little bit. This Christmas, once again, we find ourselves reflecting on the meaning of Christmas through the image of Christ in the rubble. Christ is still under the rubble in Gaza, as children are still being pulled from under the rubble in Gaza. It is heartbreaking that we are still calling and pleading for ceasefire. Decision makers seem to be content with this war continuing as long as it has. They have decided that Palestinians are dispensable. 44,700 killed, not including those under the rubble, including close to 17,500 children. 87% of the housing units are damaged. Thousands are physically handicapped. Millions are traumatized. It is literally hell on earth in Gaza. How many more need to be sacrificed before decision makers decide enough is enough? We insist. We see the image of Jesus in every child killed. They are precious to God. May we unite this Christmas in lighting a candle for Gaza, and particularly for the children of Gaza. This is beyond symbolism. Let us unite in prayer and commit ourselves to the cause of ending this genocidal war. We cannot stop talking about Gaza. We cannot stop advocating. Most importantly, we will not lose our faith and hope in God and in the goodness and justice of God. There's the picture of baby Jesus in the rubble. Now, I totally get where Munther Isaac is coming from in this, depiction of Christ in the rubble. Why? Because there is it's a very strong kind of Christian tradition, a kind of strong Christian thing, if you will, to make Jesus a relevant part of our lives, of the struggles that we endure, that Jesus is with us when we're struggling. Our hope is that God is with us. That's what I mean. Like, when people are going through hard times, that's the most of when they're crying out to God. They've got, God, I need you. I need you here with me. And the Psalms are full of these calls of God to be near us in our moment of struggle and weakness. And so it's no doubt. I actually really have no qualms if it weren't for the fact that this is very political. Is the politicizing of this story, because I do believe that Jesus is with those who are suffering in Gaza. At the same time, I also believe like that Palestinians have agency, and it's not like the Palestinians, and particularly in Gaza, are just kind of sitting around, and Israel's just wandering through Gaza, just like, oh, there's a house, let's blow it up. Oh, there's another building, let's blow that one up. Oh, there's some people running, let's shoot them. It's not like that. It is like a constant. It's a war going on, and so it seems to me like when he's saying decision makers seem to be content with this war continuing on as long as it has. Who are the decision makers? If I asked him, he would probably say Biden and Netanyahu, as if there's not some other group out there, some group that starts with an H, ends with an S, has an A and an M and an A in between. How about Hamas? How about Islamic Jihad? How about the factions that have grown up since this war started? Every time somebody goes and comes back from Gaza, they describe how every house, every building has weapons in it, has bombs in it, is rigged with explosives. How many of those have maimed children? How many children have intentionally been put in harm's way because of Hamas? There was earlier this year. I think I described this in one of my Luke Reacts videos. There was a situation in which 7 Israeli IDF soldiers were killed, and it was in the news that they were killed, but it was the reason they were killed was because they were in a hospital. Actually, they went into the maternity ward, and laying under the beds were these women, new moms with their infants, and behind them were Hamas fighters. And when the IDF soldiers walked in there, they blew up the whole floor and killed 7 IDF soldiers. And most likely, no one ever heard about the fact that Hamas killed women and newborns in order to, for what? So they the decision makers include Hamas, and what is often it frustrates me because at any point along this journey over this last year, Hamas could have said, "Guys, you're right. We lost. We lost." At this point, Hamas could say we lost. Islamic Jihad, somebody could say we lost, but they're not. They're still fighting. They're still fighting, and they have the cheering squad of Yale and Princeton and Columbia University and Harvard and the streets of the most progressive cities in America are the cheerleaders for these baby killers. Because when you put a child in front of yourself in order to make them a human shield, you are a baby killer. They are not innocent. Because if like innocence means like you don't have anything to do with it, there was a school shooting yesterday in the United States in Wisconsin. The people killed in that were innocent. They were. They're just going about their day. But the people in the United States, in our own legal code, like if somebody's building a bomb or has a rocket launcher in my living room and I don't report them to the authorities because it's wrong to have a rocket launcher in my living room, and something, that rocket is launched and people die, I'm not innocent. I'm guilty of accomplice. I'm an accomplice to murder. How many of the people who were killed are accomplices? We don't know, but I guarantee it's a bunch, right? Because that you watch the videos of the parents of children who have died, and what are they doing? Thank God my child died a martyr. I hope my sons will grow up to be other sons will grow up to be martyrs. What kind of it's messed up. And so what I see Munther here, he's painting this picture as if the Palestinians in Gaza are completely without agency, completely without any responsibility at all in what is happening there. He putting the blame on decision makers in a kind of you might as well be saying they in the they are against me kind of they. But that's not, but it is not the way it is, right? So would baby Jesus, I mean, the depiction that Munther has here also is that if Jesus was born today, and this was, I think, what he said last year, if baby Jesus was born today, he would be in the rubble of Gaza. No, he wouldn't. He wouldn't. Let me get this. Let me set the stage here a bit further by reading to you the gospel story. Okay, and it's Christmas, so it's close enough. You'll probably get it. Sitting around the Christmas tree. You know, next week and be like, read it. To your family, to the kids. Before opening the Christmas presents and whatever. But let me just read this to you. This is from Luke chapter 2. It says, "In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was in the first registration when Queen Tyrus was governor of Syria, and all went to be registered, each to his own town. And Joseph went up from the Galilee, from the town of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which was called Bethlehem, because he was from the house and lineage of David, and to be registered with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. And while they were there, they came time for her to give birth, and she gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn." Now I could go on about the shepherds in the field, but what do we know about Joseph and Mary and Bethlehem is that they were Jewish. They were Jewish. David, they're talking about there, is King David, the Jewish king of Israel. Bethlehem was the city of David. It was a Jewish city. And why aren't there Jews in Bethlehem now? There are no Jews in Bethlehem. Actually, if you drive to the border of Bethlehem, there is a sign warning Israelis, and actually particularly Jewish Israelis, that they should not enter, that it's unlawful for them to enter what's called Area A, which is it's areas that are under full Palestinian security and governmental control. And so Bethlehem, in the time of Jesus, was a Jewish town. It's a Jewish town. It was where Joseph, his family line was from. And so he had to go from Nazareth, which is in the Galilee, it's in the north of Israel, to the middle of Israel. and there was several roads he could have gone on. He could have gone on the route that would have gone along the Jordan River. He could have gone through the mountains on what is now called Route 60, but that would have taken him through the Samaritan areas, or he could have gone along the coast, along the Mediterranean. But most likely, they would have gone likely along the Jordan route, and they would have come to Bethlehem, which was a Jewish town. So in this depiction of if Jesus was born today, he would have been born, in the rubble in Gaza. Well, no, see, God chose. He didn't just choose anybody to be his, his, well, to be the savior of the world. It was all done through a particular line in a particular nation, and that would be the Jewish one. Abraham was chosen by God, and in Genesis, the biblical account is, obviously Adam and Eve, and then Cain and Abel, and then the kids, and then it got crazy, and then they had Noah, and then and then along comes Abraham, and Abraham has a couple of kids, one child of promise, and one with his wife's helper. You have Isaac and Ishmael. Two lines, in a sense, two blessing lines, two lines. And the line that the Son of God would come was the line through Isaac. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and on and on and on. I mean, actually, you read the first chapter of Matthew. It gives actually through the lineage. It says, the generations before Babylonian captivity, the generations after, but it connects this story. It's a Jewish story. And so, I mean, on that point, I hate to I don't know. Actually, I don't hate it, but to mince words with Munther, it would have been a Jewish story, and unless Gaza was a Jewish territory, it wouldn't have been born. He wouldn't have been a baby in the rubble, because that would have been a Jewish baby. Now, that Jewish baby couldn't get to Bethlehem, but it couldn't get to Bethlehem because, as will be depicted later, because of, the wall and the border. Couldn't get to Bethlehem because it's an Arab Muslim majority city in which their safety could not be ensured. If you want to politicize it, go in that direction. I don't really want to politicize it enough, because the focus doesn't need to be on the politics, but it needs to be on the fact that Jesus was born of a virgin to be the savior of the whole world. That's the message of the story. And what happens is that that story is not enough. There's a bunch of denominations where it's like, that story is not enough. You gotta to make it relevant or something. You gotta add to it. So yeah, I could keep going on. I listen. I want, as much as the rest of you and everybody else, for there to be a ceasefire in Gaza, and this war to be over, and those kids to be safe, and everybody free from harm. I want that. I do. But it's got to come at the expense of Hamas. Hamas needs to be destroyed. And when Hamas surrenders and is destroyed, that is when this war will be over, and that's when there will be peace. That's what we got to shoot for. That's what we got to pray for. And the people standing in the way are Hamas. Okay, that's the bottom line. And and so do light a candle for Gaza, that Hamas will be ending soon, and its tyranny over Gaza soon. Okay, all right. Let me show you another frustrating example of the Jesus in Keffiyehs, and this one comes from, unfortunately, it comes from the Vatican. Now, I'm not Catholic, but I got a lot of Catholic friends, right? That's funny to say, but I think there's so much. I've learned so much over the years from my Catholic friends on, back in the day when I was, fighting a bunch of issues, I'm pro-life, I'm pro-family, and I often found myself when I was, in some political battle, my back up's against the wall, and right there knit with me were my Catholic friends, because they had these great encyclicals and all this great deep, rich history, and they thought through these things well, and Catholic social teaching and things like subsidiarity and all these great, good Catholic ideas. Unfortunately, sometimes you run into things like this, in which in this video, this depiction, this picture in front of you is of Pope Francis in front of a nativity scene. And well, you don't have baby Jesus wrapped in the keffiyeh, but he's in a manger that is wrapped in a keffiyeh. And this was presented by the Palestinian Liberation Organization. It is 100% intended to be a political statement. And unfortunately, at this point, this nativity scene has been removed because I think even the Vatican realized that this is an over politicization of this story. Now, again, why is it important that how do we square this whole idea that there is a point in which Jesus did come and die and be born of a virgin for the Arabs of this world, for the Palestinians? And if it wasn't the fact that there is an intent to erase the Jewishness of Jesus, then I probably wouldn't have that big an issue. I mean, there's all kinds of examples of Jesus being, the Holy Family, or the politicization, or the politicization is not the right word. The familial look, right? Sometimes, I used to bring a lot of be a part of a lot of African American delegations to Israel, and one of the things we'd always end up discussing at some point was, was Jesus black? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think so. But I mean, if if you got to make Jesus look like you in order to believe in him, I got, that's unfortunate. I don't think that, Jesus, I don't think Jesus looked like me, but I still love him. So, I can handle it. But listen, I get people come in different stripes and whatever it takes. But the real problem with this is that there is an attempt, and one that is coming from both the left and the right, that is seeking to basically de-Judaize the story of Jesus and the Holy Family. And so that's really what I'm up against. Now, there's another example of this in a church in Washington, D.C. That it wasn't enough that the Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem did the baby Jesus in the rubble. St. Mark's in Washington, D.C., the Episcopal Church, is like, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do baby Jesus in the rubble too. And so they went all the way. They checked all the boxes on this one. So they did the, of course, baby Jesus wrapped in a keffiyeh in the rubble. There's rope around him, and there's wire and bricks and things. And baby Jesus is black. So they really wanted to make sure all the bases were covered with this one. The keffiyeh, black baby Jesus, wrapped in rope and wire and all kinds of craziness. Right now, they weren't alone. Also, St. Mark's was also there's a church in California, All Saints Pasadena, which is one of the largest Episcopal churches in the country. All of these churches are very what's the thing that have these churches have in common? Well, they are all progressive. They are mainline progressive churches in that are oftentimes, particularly with All Saints Pasadena, is one of the preeminent Episcopal churches in the country, and one that is historically known for its progressive ideology. If you go to their website, it's radical inclusion and about justice and social justice, and it's all very social justice oriented. And so this is fairly common among these types of churches. And so it got me digging around and wanting to look at what are other examples of the politicization of the Holy Family story. And one of the big ones, up until Baby Jesus in the Rubble, was the Holy Family as immigrants and refugees. So there's several examples of this. One is a photograph or a I don't know, a painting. It looks like a painting, a drawing. And this one depicts the Holy Family, and by Holy Family, I'm using for my Catholic friends, I'm using the Mary, Joseph, and Baby Jesus. Well, Baby Jesus when he was still in Mary, and Baby Jesus after he was born. Okay, so if you see this picture, it's it's this Joseph. He's got a hat on. It's backwards. Looks like he has a phone book in his hand, and he's on the phone, no doubt, looking around for a hotel. And in the background, you see Dave's City Motel, no vacancy, free HBO. You know, you have star. There's a star over Mary. Mary is sitting on a one of those coin operated ponies that kids ride, and she's very pregnant and she looks very concerned. And it's the depiction of them is that they're, it seems, Hispanic. That would be the judge if I was to judge that the nature of the face and the beard and that kind of thing. But it's very a picture, like a modernization of this story that Mary and Joseph went to Bethlehem. There was no room for them in the inn. And so they ended up giving birth to baby Jesus in a manger and wrapped him in swaddling clothes. Right? That is the depiction. And so you have a modern version of this. And then you have as the story goes, after Jesus was born, there's the three wise men come to Jesus, but they go to Herod first and say, "We hear that the Messiah has been born." And Herod says to them, "Well, come back and tell you find him. Come back and tell me where he is." And Herod puts out an edict to kill all the babies under 2 in Bethlehem. And so you have this depiction of the Holy Family fleeing, and it's intended to be similar to people fleeing violence, and it's a picture of refugees. And so it's a very common, over the years, there's been a very common depiction of Jesus or the Holy Family as refugees, fleeing terror, fleeing the terrorism of Herod. Herod was going to wipe out all the babies in Bethlehem and kill every baby under the age of 2. And so they had to flee to Egypt, and they did flee to Egypt, and that's a big part of the story. But it didn't stop there. There was a in 2019, December 2019, there was a church in California that displayed the Holy Family in cages. So you had Mary is in a cage, and baby Jesus in a cage, and Joseph is in a cage, and it was an example of if you remember Kids in Cages, in the under the Trump administration, the cry that there was all these pictures. And then in also 2019, you have this example of the Banksy Museum in Bethlehem. And Banksy is this famous artist he's done a bunch of art in Israel. One of his famous is a dove that has a target on its chest, and it's like it's being sought out through a scope. There's a depiction of what looks like a Palestinian, would normally be throwing a rock, but it's throwing a bouquet of flowers. There's these types of things. But here is, before it became cool to have baby Jesus in the rubble, it was cool to do baby Jesus locked behind the separation barrier. And this depiction, it's really well done. I gotta not lie, Banksy is a very gifted artist. And he did a cool job with the looks like an explosion that creates this kind of star over the Nativity. But those are if you've been to Israel or seen pictures of the separation barrier, that's these concrete pillars that have kind of a notch in the top, and that's how they were laid into placed where they're at. But this was from 2019. So this was the, before baby Jesus in the rubble. This was a cool shot. And there's lots of examples of where baby Jesus is the Holy Family is blocked from going to Bethlehem because of the separation barrier. And again, I know I've already said this twice, but I'll say it a third time. What we're up against here is this whole, is if the reason that the Holy Family could not get into Bethlehem because there's no Jews there anymore. They've all been, what is it? Why are there no Jews there? What do we call it when there was a city that had one population in there, and that population no longer lives in that city at all? We call that ethnic cleansing or something, I think. So at some point, the Jews were ethnically cleansed from Bethlehem. Now you might think, gosh, Luke, why is it that, is there any data on which churches are the most political? And I would tell you, why, yes, there is data on that. And there's this guy, I don't know. I'd say his name is Ryan Burge, but it could be Berg. I don't know how he says it, because I've not met him, but I've followed him for years. And he studies, he studies church growth, politics, he does a lot of demographic studies on churches. And so one of the things that he did was he looked up churches and their political activities. And he found, I know it's going to shock you all, but he found that the Episcopal Church was the most political denomination on the Protestant side. Second was the United Church of Christ, Presbyterian Church USA. There's some interdenominational churches, which I have no idea what an interdenominational church is. I'd have to study that one. But you might be asking, well, what is the criteria for somebody being political, for a denomination being political? Well, I'll tell you. The attending political meetings, attending protests or marches, contacting public officials, making political donations, putting up political signs, and volunteering for a candidate. Now, of the denominations, in the Protestant denominations, the most political, again, the Episcopal Church, the United Church of Christ, interdenominational, which again, I don't know what that is, and then Presbyterian Church USA. The least were Free Will Baptist, Baptist, what was that? I have no idea what Miss Association, Baptist for Mississippi Association, I guess, maybe. Church of Christ, and then the General Association of Registered Baptists. All right. So the Baptists aren't seems to be not particularly political. Now that might surprise you, but the Southern Baptists are also pretty low down on that list. But what do we have in common with all of these depictions of baby Jesus in the rubble, or Jesus in the Keffiyeh, or the Holy Family as refugees, the Holy Family as immigrants? I could show you, the same artists that did the Holy Family as refugees. They created kind of an icon. So that guy has done. He's done an icon on baby Jesus in the rubble. He's done an icon of George Floyd. He's done an icon of this Holy Family. He's done an icon on, school shootings, and like the dude makes icons on political things. It's no surprise that the Episcopal Church, which seems to have is clearly the one doing the Keffiyeh thing here, is the most progressive, and that's one of the critiques that is registered against Pope Francis in the Vatican right now is actually that same charge. And it was a great article this week in First Things about called Truman, where he was speaking at a forum. And it's like, why aren't you a Catholic, Carl? And he says, well, it's actually the biggest issue I have is with Pope Francis, because he basically is acting like a white liberal Protestant. And white liberal Protestants are terrible, and I don't want to be a part of that, right? So you have this depiction, so you have this. I mean, it's like, it's so sad, because I have so many friends who, there's this well-worn path in Washington D.C. All these kids go to Washington D.C. to cut their teeth on, on public policy and politics and all these things, and you have this. And then they're looking for a church, and oftentimes they grow up in kind of some big mega church, some non-denom church or whatever, and they get to DC and they want something deeper, they want something historic, and it's a well-worn path that all these kids going across the Tiber, they become Catholic, right? And so as a hardcore Protestant, I for years tried to scare off all these young impressionable kids from crossing the Tiber, and nonetheless they didn't listen to me, and a bunch joined the Catholic Church, and they do it because of this the intellectual rigor and the history and this deep ancient, we're doing this a long time kind of stuff. But then you got Pope Francis, who's doing like the baby Jesus and Keffiyeh, and it's like, right? I'm having a fun time over here because it's fun to me, whatever. But that's the problem, is that you get this politicization of the narrative of the Nativity, and it just makes me wonder, why is that? Why do we gotta add this extra layer to the story? Isn't it enough? I mean, it's like, it's one of the, one of the things that, I would say, let's say like real faithful Catholics and Protestants share is this, and I read that Carl Truman said this too, is this belief in the supernatural, belief in miracles. And there's one of the most hard to believe miracles in all the world is the virgin birth. But it's part of the declaration of faith that we affirm as Christians, that we believe that Jesus was born of a virgin, suffered on Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. It's part of the Apostles' Creed. It's one of the things that we actually believe. And so when somebody adds to that by taking that story and then making it fit their political cause du jour of the moment, they're stealing away from the miracle of the moment, because someone had to be the reason why Jesus had to be born of a virgin was because the sin of Adam comes through the man. And so the seed that forms Jesus was a sinless seed. It didn't come from man. It came from God. And therefore, we believe that Jesus not only was born, but lived a sinless life in order that when he would become the ultimate sacrifices, and then all who believe in him will be saved. We believe that. But this is a very key part of this story. And when you politicize this story, you're saying that part is not enough. I got to add this extra hook into it. I got to make it relevant for the kids or hip. And, if I put a keffiyeh on it, then it will, like, I get to say all these extra things. But don't say the extra things. It's enough to say that, like, the miracle of the birth of Jesus is hard enough. And we shouldn't have things getting in the way of that. And if you have to add to it, it makes me wonder whether you believe the miracle itself. It really does. So that's the politicization bugs me. That's probably the, like I said at the beginning, I don't really have that big of an issue with people feeling like they need to somehow articulate how Jesus is with those who are suffering, because he is. And that's an important thing to articulate, particularly for people who are suffering. It's been a rough year for me. I'm not gonna lie. There's been so many moments this year where I was like, God, I cannot do this. I don't want to do this. I cannot do this. Awake at 2 or 3 in the morning, just like, Jesus, your word says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Well, my burden seems unbearable in this moment. And I just cannot do this right now. And I cry out. And in those moments to, like, I do believe that Jesus is comes to my aid, is with me. And my hope is that there are people in Gaza, when they're crying out to God, that they feel his presence close to them. That is what I want from them. I want them to feel that. But at the same time, I don't think politicizing this, and putting baby Jesus in the rubble to score political points against the Jews is helpful to the Christian witness. Like, the International Court of Justice in South Africa used Munter Isaac's sermon as part of their case against Israel. The adding this wrapping baby Jesus in keffiyeh further affirms. I mean, I don't know how many conversations over the years I've had with people who have said, well, who deny that Jesus was Jewish. I remember one time, actually, we went to the home of a family whose son had been killed, or actually had participated in a suicide bombing. He was with, I think, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP. And I was sitting on, the group I was with, and I was sitting on the porch talking to the kid's father, and he was talking about how proud he was of his son, and he's not against Jews, he's against Zionists. Anyways, I ended up basically, him and I started asking questions. This was the last time I was allowed to ask questions to any of the terrorists I met with over the years, because I got him to basically admit that Jews were Zionists and therefore he hates them all. But in the moment, he was trying to make it look good for the other people with me. Afterwards, I been standing around with this American lady who was there, and she was like, "Yeah, Jesus was Palestinian." I'm like, "What? No, he's not. He was Jewish." No, Jesus came. Jesus was in Egypt. I was like, "Yeah, he was in Egypt after he gave birth and fleeing Herod. He went to like what?" It was like it was just like bizarro world. Anyways, I left that, and the guy came up to afterwards and said, "Luke, you just we can never go back there." He said, "You can never have that guy come back." So that was the last time I got to go to the PFLP family, the family of terrorists, to learn that Jesus was nonetheless, Palestinian, and terrorists are great. But that's a story, keeps coming up on the socials and all that sort of stuff. There is a move, and it comes from both, like I said, the right and the left, that says that Jesus was a Palestinian, and denies the Jewishness. Listen, Christians, we need to affirm. We need to affirm over and over and over that Jesus was Jewish, because he was. It's the truth. And it's also the truth that he was born of a virgin, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. The third day he rose again. That's the story we tell. It's a good story. It's all the story we need to tell. We don't need to add the politics to it. You look it up. Go for yourself. The politicization of Nativity, and see what comes up. It's all in one direction, by the way, and it lines up with Ryan Burge's analysis on the politics of the churches. So, with that, I think that's good. It's a good place to close this out. I hope that in the next week, as you are in anticipation of the celebration of Christmas, the birth of Jesus, that you don't politicize it. It needs no politicization. Don't politicize it for the right or the left. Just don't do it. Just read the story. It's through and through the same. It's a good story. It's the greatest story ever told, as someone might say. So, thank you very much for listening. Please like and subscribe to this, and consider a donation to the Philos Project. It'd be really great. And until next time, thank you, and Merry Christmas.